All right, everybody, welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking into something that I think is pretty fascinating, and that is this whole renaming of Fort Moore back to Fort Benning again.
Yeah.
I think this story, it really brings up a lot of interesting stuff about military history.
Yeah.
And how we think about naming things and even some of the controversies surrounding it.
Absolutely.
And of course, the whole honoring heroes part of it. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a good one. So just to kind of set the stage for anyone who's not totally familiar with this whole thing,
Right.
we're talking about a military base that was originally called Camp Benning,
Right.
named after a Confederate general. And then back in 2023, it was renamed to Fort Moore in honor of Lieutenant General Hal Moore and his wife Julia. And, General Moore was this really famous figure from the Vietnam War. He wrote the book, We Were Soldiers Once. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very well known. And
Yeah. So it was a big deal when they renamed it.
big shift in, how the Army was thinking about its history.
Totally. And then all of a sudden, just like that, we're back to Fort Benning.
Right.
But there's a twist.
Right. There's a twist because it's not the same Benning.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a different Benning altogether. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
So who is this new Benning that we're all supposed to be talking about?
Yeah. So this time we're talking about Corporal Fred G. Benning, World War I hero.
World War I, huh?
World War I, so we've gone way back.
So I guess the question is, what makes this guy, worthy of having this major base named after him?
Yeah. So picture this.
Okay.
You're 17 years old. You enlist, you get shipped off to Europe in the middle of World War I.
Oh, okay.
And all of a sudden, you're in a really bad spot. Your commanding officers have been killed in action, and you're the highest ranking soldier left.
Oh, no.
And you got to lead 20 men through heavy fire.
Oh, gotcha.
That's what Benning did. He takes command, leads these men through intense fighting, and because of his actions, he earns the Distinguished Service Cross.
Yeah, I mean, the Distinguished Service Cross, that's a
big deal.
That's a huge deal. That's like one of the highest military honors you can get.
Right up there.
Now-
Yes, second only to the Medal of Honor.
Exactly. So, I mean, this guy's a bona fide hero.
Absolutely.
And, I was reading one of the articles about this, and there was something that really stood out to me about Benning.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
So apparently he actually refused a formal presentation of the Distinguished Service Cross.
Really?
Yeah, he even asked for it to be sent to him in the mail.
Wow. I mean, I guess that kind of shows you what kind of guy he was.
It really does, right? Like, you don't hear that every day, especially for such a prestigious award.
No, not at all. Most people would want the ceremony and the recognition.
You would think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it almost makes you wonder if he was, almost embarrassed by the attention or something.
Maybe it just wasn't his style. Maybe he was just a humble guy who didn't want all the fuss.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point. I mean, that kind of reminds me of, in the memo about the renaming, they talk about how Benning really embodied this thing called the infantryman's creed.
Right. Yeah, the creed, that's like the core set of values for an infantry soldier, right?
Exactly. It's all about loyalty, duty, and, never failing your country.
Yeah, it's basically the ideal they strive for.
Totally. And I think that's what's really interesting about this whole renaming thing. It's not just about putting a name on a base.
No, it's about sending a message.
It's about making a statement about what kind of soldier they want to honor.
Yeah, it's about the values they want to represent.
Exactly. And I mean, when you think about it, Fort Benning, that's not just any base.
Oh, yeah, it's a massive
Like,
place.
it's a huge deal. I mean, we're talking about over 120,000 people who are connected to that base in some way.
Right, it's a whole city, practically.
Totally. And it's home to all these super elite units, too, like the Army Rangers.
Yep. The Rangers.
You've got the Armor and Infantry schools there. And even the Maneuver Center of Excellence, which is basically like the brain trust for the entire Army when it comes to maneuver warfare.
Yeah, all that training for tanks, infantry, anything that involves moving forces on the battlefield, all that comes from Fort Benning.
So when they rename a place like that,
Yeah,
it's definitely a big deal. It's sending a pretty powerful message.
definitely.
And, it's interesting because this isn't even the first time we've seen something like this happen, right?
Right, it's becoming a bit of a trend.
Yeah, remember Fort Liberty?
Oh, yeah.
That was renamed back to Fort Bragg earlier this year,
Right.
honoring another World War II hero.
Yeah, it seems like there's a real shift happening in how the military wants to be perceived, moving away from those Confederate ties.
Yeah.
And instead focusing on these individuals who showed extraordinary courage and commitment.
So what do you think it all means?
I think it's a reflection of our changing values as a society. We're starting to look at our history differently and reassess who we choose to celebrate.
And I think it's really interesting to think about, why these particular soldiers are being chosen.
Yeah, what makes them stand out?
Right. What are the qualities that we're now looking for in our heroes?
Right.
And I think that's something that everyone listening can think about too.
Absolutely.
It's not just about, a base getting a new name.
Right. It's a much bigger conversation.
It's about how we as a nation view our military past and how we want to remember it.
It makes you wonder what other untold stories are out there.
Yeah. What other unsung heroes are waiting to be discovered?
Whose names might be on bases in the future?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, history is full of these incredible individuals who showed bravery and resilience.
Absolutely.
And it's up to us to make sure their stories are heard.
And to learn from them.
Exactly. So the next time you see a military base or a monument, take a moment to think about the person behind the name.
Their story might surprise you.
It might even inspire you.
You never know.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but I hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
It's a good one.
As always, we'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. And until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning the world around you.
Be digging.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.